Yeah, I'll take care of that.
Joachim, can you mute? I think.
Yeah.
Everyone's
muted. I'll try to mute if more happen, but yeah, recording is running. Let's go.
Great. So good morning, everyone. A very warm welcome to the session on the topic Futures Thinking Vinnova meets Sitra. I hope you can hear me well. I hope you can see our screen. My name is Annie Lemark and I work here at Vinnova, and I will lead you through this hour we have together this morning. So we will start off with a short introduction to describe Vinnova and our work around strategic foresight and current projects. And after that, we will have our honor guest of today's event, Mikko Dufva, foresight specialist at Sitra. He will present their work using foresight and futures thinking methods to accomplish their mission of building a successful Finland for tomorrow. And this session will also end with a Q&A session where we can dig into questions you may have and into the topic. So feel free to add your questions during the session in the chat, and we will take them in the end of the session. Also, we are recording this event, so it is possible to see it afterwards also. And today's event is held under Sweden Innovation Days 2022. And Sweden Innovation Days is a 3-4-day global digital event totally dedicated to fostering international collaboration. And during these days, we aim to attract collaboration partners with a clear and actionable missions within innovation to work across sectors in order to create a more sustainable world. And Vinnova, we are one of the organizers of the event, and we are Sweden's innovation agency, and we help to build Sweden's innovation capacity, contributing to sustainable growth with the clear vision that Sweden should be an innovative force in a sustainable world. And today's theme on Sweden Innovation Day number 3 is co-creation for innovation, where we put an extra big focus on all the events on how we, in order to create a positive change, need various sectors to work together to address today's challenges. And after Vinnova, we often talk about 3 main tasks that we have as an agency, where collaboration is key. And shortly, they are identifying, mobilizing, and funding, where identifying is very much about having close contact with actors and different parts of the ecosystem in order to find out where our effort can make the most difference as a governmental agency. And mobilizing is about creating opportunities and incentives for organizations to work together to meet important social challenges. And the last one is funding, where it's all about stimulating collaboration through innovation and research grants, with the aim on how knowledge and skills from different perspectives can meet and where organizations learn from each other. And our role as a funder is rather significant in Sweden. Every year, we at Vinnova invest approximately 3 billion Swedish kronor into research and innovation. And our funding reaches many in the system. It's both companies, universities, institutes, nonprofit organizations, and public sector. And we want to give as many as possible the opportunity to experiment and test new ideas before it becomes profitable. So we often talk about Vinnova going in very early in projects where the risk is high and where other funding is hard to get. And also, last point about our mission. I mean, we know today that the challenges that we face in the society is very complex and global, and it really requires new ways of thinking, and it affects all parts of our lives. And therefore, we often talk about how innovation is needed in the whole system throughout society, and that we need to talk about innovation in a much broader sense than we probably had before. Therefore, the project that we fund span over many areas of society and sectors, both privately and publicly funded activities. And it can be everything from projects that promote social norm critical innovation to innovation in the mine with 5G technology. And one important part of our mission as an innovation agency is being able to look ahead and be able to lead from the future, as we often say. And therefore, we have established a new area at Vinnova named Futures Area, with a special focus on foresight and exploring future scenarios, which we've seen as very important task to become a forward-looking organization that ensures our own and society's ability to act proactively on future challenges and opportunities. So this is a pretty new area, 1 year old, and now I'm very happy to be joined by my colleague Joachim, who is also the strategic area lead of the future areas. Joachim, welcome.
Thanks.
So before we let Mikko in, I thought it would be interesting to just ask you a couple of questions and dig a little bit into this new area. If people listening in are wondering what Sweden's Innovation Agency are doing within foresight and future studies. So first off, can you explain something about like why do we need a strategic areas, the future area at Vinnova?
Well, I'd say many reasons, but the ones I would like to bring forward the most is that one is that we realizing that the societal challenges we're facing today are systemic in their character. We need systems transformation, system innovation. We need to innovate how we innovate. We have a toolbox that's doing just great, but we need to expand that toolbox with new ways of working, new ways of addressing these challenges. And also, we're talking about leading from the future, which is another way of talking about strategic foresight, that we, by visioning alternative futures, plausible futures, not a forecast of the future, but rather a foresight of the future or futures. Very important with the plural S, because we're not saying that we know exactly which specific future we're heading, but if we create different scenarios of different futures, working with the strategic foresight process, we then choose which is our future, which one would we like to contribute to, and then we make plans to head towards that future. So that's our mission. Also, we need to become systemic in how we find out new themes, new ways of addressing new challenges, which is currently not on our radar.
So interesting. It's really about that. You can't predict the future, but you can really start making decisions today on the favorable futures that you want to see at least. Exactly. But what is the vision, would you say, of the area going forward, and what will be important for the work going forward?
So our vision, our northern star for this area is that we would like to contribute to creating a nation prototyping a future for the benefit of all. So that's why we get up out of bed in the morning to go to work and work for that vision. And that, as I said previously, I mean, working with creating the systemic approach towards leading from the future, and how we constantly question how are we doing the right things, are we addressing the right challenges. So that's our vision.
And for those who are curious, can you maybe share some examples of how the area have started the work and kind of what is in the pipeline going forward for Vinnova's future areas?
Sure. I mean, as you said, it's quite a new area, and we're in the midst of the transition process and establishing this area. But so we're working with different projects. We're creating a scanning function to make sure that we find new themes and interesting areas to address. Within strategic foresight specifically, we have a very interesting project going on where we, through speculative design, which is creating prototypes from the future. I mean, strategic foresight and scenarios is much about stimulating a debate, stimulating a dialogue about what kind of future do we want. And by using speculative design, creating prototypes that are visiting us from the future, physical artifacts that we can actually hold in our hands, or like an environment that we can step into and see what the future could be. That's a project that we're actually on Monday we're opening the funding of projects that will explore this new way of working. So that's really exciting.
Okay, great. So on Monday we are having an open call that is opening that you can actually apply for this that you talked about, like creating prototypes of the future.
Yes.
Great. Is there any last words you want to say, Joachim, before we let Mikko in? Something you want to say about the future area or important things going forward for us?
No, I'm just really happy to have Mikko presenting to us Finland's work within this area, strategic foresight, I should say, futures thinking at large is really inspiring, and we're learning so much from our neighbors in the east. So looking forward to hearing more about what you do today.
Great, Joachim. Thank you so much. And it's really about, I mean, as we said, it's day 3 at Sweden Innovation Days. This day is all about collaboration. So I think it's so great that we are joined by our colleague from Sitra, Mikko Dufva, and I will leave the floor to you to present how you're working with foresight and future studies, and also the weak signals report I know that you just released. So Mikko, I will stop sharing my screen and I will let you take the scene.
Fantastic. Thank you. And thank you for this opportunity to talk about what we are doing at the Finnish Innovation Fund Sitra with regards to foresight and also about this weak signals report. And perhaps I hope I can give you some tips also on how to get started or how to enhance your futures work and your scanning work. Okay, now I'm sharing the slides. I work at Sitra at our foresight team, and I thought I'd start by saying a few words about Sitra for those who don't know what Sitra is. It is a kind of a unique organization in that it's originally or it still is kind of a gift to Finland. When Finland turned 50 years in 1967, the parliament decided to establish this organization with the aim to build the successful Finland of tomorrow. And of course, in 1967, the way to do that was a rather different than what we do now. It was originally more about research and development funding. Then it became more on venture capital, and now we are more of a societal change agent. I really like the kind of the 3 things that Vinnova is doing: this identifying, mobilizing, and funding. We have formulated it as such that we are not a think tank. We are a think, connect, and do tank. So we do provide and commission different reports on things that on emerging issues, on things that are important for the Finnish society. But we also offer this kind of a platform and a forum for different stakeholders to come together, and we facilitate and organize these kind of projects where we think about what do we need to do together in order to create a successful Finland of tomorrow. And then we also focus on the do part. We fund things, we do experiments, etc. And actually, most of the funding goes there. We are still under the parliament, but we are independent. We are operating on the endowment capital and capital investment, so we don't receive any budget money, no annual money, which gives a certain amount of independence. So we are kind of operating on the returns of the fund, the original fund that was established 50 years ago. I think the most important thing that we are doing is to that we are creating the future together. We can't do it by ourselves. We are 150 people, but we hope to connect different stakeholders together to really collaborate and create the changes that we need in this time. We are currently focusing on 3 themes: enhancing democracy, one on sustainability, now especially on biodiversity and ways to address that, and then data economy, and especially fair data economy, and there we are operating on the European level. I work in foresight, which is outside of these themes, but supporting everything. And Sitra's foresight, the aim is basically that the possible directions of future development would be well known in Finland. Different kinds of futures are widely discussed, and also this discussion leads to action. So we are visiting the different futures in order to make better decisions in the present. One of the most kind of popular products that we have is our Megatrend report and these Megatrend cards that we offer for free. And these are used widely in strategic work in Finland. And I guess now also elsewhere, because these are also available in English and, if I remember correctly, also in Swedish. Our foresight approach could be described by these 3 modes, and here I'm building on the kind of the futures literacy framework, or adapting it a bit. We are the Megatrend work is you could say that it is about preparing for the future, and this is about looking at what is changing and what is uncertain, what are the key trends, and also a bit about the tensions between these different trends. This is something we've been doing for many years, and this is kind of well established, and Megatrend reports are often, people are asking when will the next one be published. We published the last one in 2020, and the megatrends don't change that quickly, so well, perhaps next year. But then when we know that okay, these are the key challenges, these are the key changes, we know, then the question becomes that okay, what do we need to do now? What can we do? What is the desired future? To whom is it is desired? And then we move into this planning approach to futures. This is all about making visions and making roadmaps and plans, and we do this as well. But what I want to talk about today is more about this novelty approach to futures, and this is about identifying the assumptions that we have about futures, as identifying our kind of thinking about futures. What do we assume is going to happen? What do we take for granted? What don't we question? What are our blind spots? And here we have now published a second time this week Signals report. The first one was in 2019 when we already saw that despite the kind of the popularity of the Megatrend report, or perhaps because of that, people might have too narrow view about future. So if you just look at the trends, you miss a lot of the kind of surprises that are happening. Of course, in 2019, this was a tougher sell than now. Now we are all about surprises. We know that the world can change rapidly, and uncertainties are every day now. But now this is the second time that we published this week's Signals report, and if I would kind of summarize the main message from that in one sentence, it would be that we need new stories about futures. We need to kind of challenge and rethink many of our assumptions that we have now, and we need to really look at where are we already, what has already changed that we just haven't paid enough attention to. So And we see that these weak signals and weak signals work is a way to help us think about these different futures. Weak signal by definition is a sign of an emerging issue or the first symptom of change. There are of course many different definitions, but these are the ones that we are using. They are things that have happened. They are really you can kind of check that, okay, this is a new technology or a new some strange event or thing that has happened, but it's really something that we would usually just let slide or think that, okay, this is ridiculous, I'm not going to focus on that. But in these things, these weak signals are these are these kind of ways to think about different futures. So we think about trends versus weak signals. Trends are all about what is changing now. They are kind of the direction of the current development, and they are very useful in understanding what is changing now and how the kind of current system is evolving or changing. But they are also all about continuity and all about kind of what's next. Whereas weak signals, these signs of emerging issues, are more about challenging the current system, challenging our ways of working, challenging our business models, challenging. These are all about these kind of disruptions. And if the trend question is what's next, the weak signal question is what if? These are not predictions. These are highly about speculation, and these are also very subjective. So things that might be more surprising to me might not be surprising to others. Take an example from synthetic biology. You can modify yeast to produce silk, or well, basically a lot of different materials, which might be surprising to some, but then again, if you're researching that topic, it's your kind of everyday job. So the kind of the process of identifying these weak signals and then coming up with this what if question has basically these two parts, that it's about perceiving and interpreting. And whereas trends are really easy to identify, you can just pick up any trend report and it will say that, okay, these are the trends that you should look into. And you don't have to read many trend reports when you are noticing that, okay, they are all saying basically the same things, which is a good thing. But weak signals, on the other hand, you have to look to places where you don't usually look. You have to look at the margins. You have to look beyond your own kind of field of expertise, to different business sectors, etc. You also need to think about how you are looking. If you're just reading the newspaper, it's probably not enough. Perhaps you need to look at what some visionaries are saying, or look at what's happening in social media or in arts, or then gather around a very kind of diverse mix, or a diverse group of people, and ask them what they think is interesting now or surprising now. Then the second part, is interpreting, is really about what kind of hat you are wearing. From what perspective are you interpreting the signal? And here also your values or worldviews, mental models play a role. Do you think that this signal is a good thing, or to what do you connect that signal? And as I said, it's a rather subjective process, this interpreting that, okay, what might this mean? And you can't really get rid of this subjectivity, but you can be open about it. So our kind of perspective into this weak signals work is that we want to achieve a fair, sustainable, and inspiring futures. So not all of the signals that we have collected are about fair, sustainable, and inspiring futures, but we are interpreting them from this point of view. They might point to a wholly different future, whereas then we see them more as a kind of threats, or they might point out to new opportunities that help us envision what fair, sustainable, and inspiring future might actually be. And why this is important, as I said in the beginning, we need new stories. There are bigger changes ahead than we want to admit. And this is, I think this is a crucial thing. We are kind of in denial about the magnitude of changes in environment, in equality, in geopolitics, etc. Some futures researchers are talking about post-normal times where this whole idea of normal isn't really useful, but and these conflicts and chaos and complexity are the things that are our new normal. These things we are living in time of surprises, basically. And then in this situation, our old stories about future, our old visions about future are not enough. And therefore, we need different kinds of narratives about futures, and we need to challenge the old ones, the current ones that we have. And we hope that the weak signals work helps in this. So this was about the methodology. Now I want to talk briefly about what is actually in the report. Well, there is a section on this whole kind of approach and what we hope to achieve. But then there are 6 chapters on the signals we have collected and interpretations of those, and also short stories about what this future might be. This is currently only available in Finnish, but it should be in English in February. But we have also wanted to bring this more towards a human level. Many futures work is rather abstract, and but future happens to us humans. So we wanted to bring these the analysis to the level of humans, and we did that with the help of these places. So we are looking at what are the surprising things that might happen at home, at work, in the nature, at the city. In decision making, we couldn't really think of a good place for where all of our politics and decision making happen. So this is more of an abstract place, I admit. And then in the metaverse, which is all about our digital world and signals related to that. I'm not going to go through all of these, but I'm going to give you a glimpse of 3 of these and to give you an idea of what these what we have kind of highlighted. And this is by no means a comprehensive list. These are not predictions. These are not our vision that this is something that should happen. These are more kind of an invitation to think about different futures. And we really hope that this helps in that. So if we start from home, what are some key, interesting signals that are happening there? Well, we are there's a lot of talk about smart homes and smart devices, and these have become part of many households. They bring with them also different kind of security threats, and homes can now be hacked, the smartphones at least. But there are also some kind of this cultural or influences in how we behave. If you think about a really kind of a smart home with lots of sensors and for example, a toilet that analyzes your health, if you have friends over, is it a violation of their privacy if you keep these sensors on? And what are the kind of the cultural habits that then become part of our everyday life as part of this kind of very smart sensor driven homes. Then we could also think about what's the role of circular economy in households, and what's the how can we create these kind of circular loops within our households or in smaller circles. Or then we can think about different changes in family structures. For example, take aging population. What if there would be many generations living under the same roof? Some might say again, and or if we think about things like polyamory and or friends having children together, what are the juridical implications of these? Then we have also signals from the US on and elsewhere on homelessness and driven by pandemic, etc. So what if there would be no home? What are the signals, and could this happen in Finland or in the Nordics in a larger scale? Moving from home to work, there was an interesting signal that Canon put these surveillance cameras in their Chinese offices, which only let people in who were smiling. A kind of a nice pun on this smile phrase when you're taking a picture, but also a kind of a part of these signals that there are so much surveillance at work already. This was kind of obvious, but we have there's so much data gathered from our use of cloud services, etc. And then the question becomes what. How do we use this data? You can use it for surveillance. You can use it for tracking your own well-being, etc. So can think about different futures. What does it mean to be at work in this time of data and opportunities for surveillance? Then another thing is about this. During the pandemic, the question has risen. Well, actually, this was already before the pandemic, but it has grown. That why should we come to the office if we can work remotely? So what if the offices then become these places of course, connecting with people, but also places of well-being? You can buy a well-being pod with soothing lights and music and aromatherapy, where you can kind of relax between your meetings, etc. Or if these become part of our offices. Or then we can think about that, okay, well, what if there are no workers? We see this as part of Brexit from pandemic, and in the US, there's again this kind of signals that many are changing jobs or refusing to work in certain fields, etc. Or what if the whole idea of work, what work means, changes? What if we don't think about work as a way to earn a living, but as a way to improve the environment? Or what if we are start regulating work so that we only allow jobs that are beneficial or neutral to the environment, and ban jobs that aren't, to be a shift in our policies. Then a third one that I want to highlight is the Metaverse. And here you have a lot of different technological signals on all sorts of fake news, deep fake things. how do you actually know that this is Mikko from Sitra talking? I could be an AI avatar talking. Perhaps the AI avatar wouldn't mumble as much, but anyhow, what if all of this is fake? All of these things that are happening in the metaverse, in the digital world. Or we can think about the kind of the vulnerabilities that exist. What would our metaverse and digital world be without electricity, without networks? What if there would be a solar storm that knocks out electricity for a while? How would our society function? On a more positive side or more kind of inspiring side, perhaps we see signals on ways to use technology to connect with other animals and other kind of life forms. What if we would have this internet of beings, internet of animals, and would be more able to communicate with them? Or then we see signals of for example, China banning these online games and well, a lot of different things. What if this would become the norm? What if our digital world would be rationed? What if we would only be able to use the internet for let's say 1 hour a day, because more than that, and it has adverse health impacts, for example. So if it didn't become clear, I think the main question with weak signals work is what if? And this question opens up the possibilities for different ideas about futures. So I did promise some ways to get started. We have made this 5-step program, and can read more about this from the report once it's translated. But the 5 steps are basically, first you need to broaden your mindset. You need to recognize what you don't recognize your blind spots. And then once you've kind of broadened your view, you can start collecting signals, and we list some places to start. And it's okay to use existing collections as inspiration and crowdsource the search, etc. Then the main part is about interpreting what these signals mean and creating these what if signals. For example, if you have a signal about surveillance cameras in Chinese offices, you can then think about what would be different what if questions based on that signal or a collection of similar signals. Then to answer those what if stories and bring these things closer to the everyday life, we have recognized that telling stories is really useful. So try to answer the what if questions with stories. And then the final and really crucial part of this is to discuss futures knowledge is best when shared. Because we are creating the future together, we need to kind of understand our different viewpoints about future and really think about what have we learned when we have kind of visited alternative futures with these stories. What can we do different now? Because the future doesn't exist. We are creating it right now at every moment and with every decision we make. So briefly on the kind of the first step, the broaden, to give you some idea what this might mean. We have this sense breaking exercise. You might have heard about sense making, which is about, well, making sense of what is happening. Sense breaking is about challenging your assumptions, and we have collected a set of different questions, and we have a kind of short exercise to go along with this. But it is basically about answering these questions that what is now forbidden, what is complicated, what are the current taboos, what are some new things in familiar topics? what is happening elsewhere that couldn't happen in Sweden or wherever you are placed. What are the things that make you feel that, okay, this is ridiculous? What are the kind of the outliers? And in these times, I think it's also good to focus on what are the new sources of hope? What are the seeds of good Anthropocene, for example? That's one project worth checking out, which is listing different good things that are happening now. If you're interested in kind of using more futures tools, we have gathered the Future Makers Toolbox. This is now available in English. You can find it from our web pages, sitra.fi, and which is a collection of different tools that we have found are useful when thinking about futures. We have also last year published this futures frequency workshop method and everything to go along with it. If you're looking for a kind of a ready-made package to have a workshop on thinking about different futures, we have a facilitator's hand guide. We have the slides ready for you. We have templates, videos of the presentations, and different audio stories about futures. All of these are free to use and apply however you want. You can find these at futuresfrequency.fi. With these words, I thank you for this opportunity and looking forward to the discussion.
Great. So inspiring, Mikko, to hear you speak about these things and how you work. We have gotten some questions before we jump into those. And also, I want to encourage everyone to keep on going with your questions, also if you have anything to Joachim from Vinnova. But first off, Mikko, you talked about these steps. I think it's so good to get these clear, like actionable steps that you can actually take. Do you have any tips on how do you get started? How do you get inspired by actually adding this into your work? And also an add-on on that question, can everyone benefit from doing this? Or is it especially public or private sector or privately? So 2 questions in one.
Yeah, I think this is beneficial for everybody. We all think about futures and we can all become better at it. The futures frequency is kind of our answer to where to start. And the way we try to make it as kind of accessible and easy kind of a first step is that we are using a lot of different examples and stories on for example, there's one story about Elise Boulding who ran these workshops and what the impact could that could be that had. So really pointing out that, okay, we have done this futures work before. It's have had these benefits. This might be something to you want to think about, and trying to make it really really kind of accessible and easy to use, that easy to understand that there are many futures and we can think about different futures. We are usually, in my experience, so kind of stuck with the old stories about futures. So just getting this across is a huge thing in many organizations.
Great. Yeah, we got so many questions. I start with one that are connected to this. So it's Frederick who's saying, very exciting. How do we make people psychology able to identify these weak signals, in particular for human and social dimensions of development? Can young people who perhaps are less strongly framed be better equipped? What do you say, Mikko? Is this something that we should be able to start doing in schools or learn in an early age also?
Definitely, and I think I would say that I'm not that worried about kids or the youth, because there are many initiatives already. Teach the Future, for example, has terrific materials on aimed at schools on getting this into the curriculum, the futures thinking into curriculum. What I am worried about is us who are already in the workforce and have perhaps gotten used to that this is the way it's always been, this is the way we always do things, and this is just not going to cut it anymore. And there is, it might be sometimes hard to get started. Therefore, we have this sense breaking exercise is one thing that we have used, which is rather good. We have also used different experiential methods to get people to use different modes of thinking, as Sohail Inaitula, one Futures says. We are actually also, I forgot to mention, but we are continuing this Weak Signals project with in collaboration with the Design Museum of Finland. We are going to open up a museum exhibit about things from the future, basically. And we are now running in February a couple of workshops on that, and we have designers making this. But the idea is then to have different discussions in this kind of around these objects or prototypes of the future. And I think having these tangible things might also be a good place to start, I hope. I'm really looking forward to also your kind of experiences on that. I think there's huge potential there as well.
That's really interesting. It's very close to the open call that we will open on Monday, if I understand Joachim right in the description. But also, I feel that's a great point to get people start to discuss these different futures. I think that's so important. And we have a question here from Matthias. How does the work continue after the discuss part? Which institutions do then take over Parliament? What role does mission-oriented innovation policy play in this context? So that was also two questions in one, but maybe an important part of that is really how do we take it further from the discussion part? What can we do with it actually in the organization?
I think this is a really crucial point and in the Futures Frequency workshop there are 3 parts. You have challenge, imagine, and then take action. And this take action is all about thinking about the different actions that we do need to take on related to technology and solutions and innovations, but also related to structures as legislation, and also related to then mental models and kind of our worldviews. And these have different actors. Companies can create solutions and apply technologies, but when you go to the legislation level, you need governments, you need policy interventions, etc. So there is no kind of clear answer on that. What we are trying to do at Sitra, our foresight work guides our strategy, or it's really at the basis, and we are trying to create systemic change, and we do that together then with different stakeholders, with companies, with governments, etc., and sometimes with all of them together. So yeah, it's messy, but it is what systemic change basically is.
So it can lead to many things, really.
Yeah.
So I'm continuing here in the chat and seeing what else that we got in. Frederick is wondering about if you can share information about the Teach the Future. Was that?
Yeah, I think that there's now a link. It's teachthefuture.org.
So, perfect. Yeah. We are learning from each other and building up our questions. That's great. So we also have. If someone want to ask a question, also you can also unmic yourself if I'm missing something here. Let me see here. Vanessa is asking something that we were a little bit upon before, telling stories. What are your top tips, pitfalls on creating great future stories formats?
Yeah.
Maybe you have advice, Mikko, also on like the best podcast, or I know that you are releasing a book now. Is there a read list that you feel that we should start like to have the formats of telling stories in a way that engages people?
Yeah, to all of those who are speaking Finnish, there's now today a book out that I've co-written. But on the stories, we held a series of workshops in the autumn where we co-created stories, and we used a really simple kind of frame, kind of what is the first setting, what happens then, what surprising thing happens next, and how does it conclude, and we gave us a signal and what if question to start with, and then the groups created these stories in I think we gave them half an hour or something. So it was and it worked rather well. So people can create stories together. Good podcasts. I have my own. I haven't updated it for a while, but you can find it foresightbubble.com, I think. There's also a good, if you're interested in futures thinking, there's a good podcast called FuturePod, futurepod.org, I think. Those are on the futures field things that I'm listening to, but there are actually so many good podcasts now on things related to future as well.
But it's really great also that you have on Sitra this toolbox and everything. So we should all really go into that and see. So I know we would have probably time for one more question. I know Frederick, you have raised your hand. Do you want to say your question out loud?
Thanks for a great intro, and it's probably both for Mikko and also for you at Vinnova. I was trying to sense break them, because I don't agree on the conceptualization of well-being as the thing. I think we have to change that quite radically to thinking about that's the crucial capabilities we as humans have together. And then the question comes in, if you want to change mental models like that really sets a new framing around all of these settings. What are some of the ways you can work then to sort of really reshape mental models, which is sort of the deepest layer of the iceberg model in some way? What's your thoughts about that?
This is something we have touched upon. We have had a project on lifelong learning and what is lifelong learning all about, and you have you need skilled workforce, and you need kind of this basic understanding of how things work. But there's also that we need learning in order to ensure our well-being and ensure our participation in society. And so there, the well-being is all part of this kind of learning frame. Another project we now have is about the futures of economic systems, and there the kind of the well-being is also really crucial. And there are it's now in more messy phase, but there are many ideas of what well-being then is about, and is it about human well-being, is about the environmental well-being, both, and how these are connected. So a lot of thoughts arise from that.
Yeah, and then also that well-being is a means to other ends. It's not just the end. I think that changing that frame is probably quite important for all the different, the economies beyond GDP, etc. So thanks for that. So that might be something in Sweden to continue to explore as well. Why Sweden hasn't been that strong on the well-being economy side. Thanks.
Great question, Frederick. And with that said, I think that we are coming to an end of this session. Mikko, you shared so many interesting things with us. And also, I know you mentioned the Weak Signals report will be translated, right, in English. So we will be happy to know where can we find it, and about when do you think it will be published?
Yeah, it'll be in February. It is now being translated. I think it's now already in the kind of the checking phase, but it probably will be in February. You can find the old material, which is still quite good, even if I say so myself, from citra.fi/weak signals, or then citra.fi. You can find all megatrend work and all of the things that Sitra is doing. Basically, everything we are doing is free of charge, and you can use it freely. So and you can find it all from our website.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Mikko, for this inspiring webinar on this topic that I think that we will need to continue talk much more about in public sector and private sector, of course, also. And for all you listening in, this is the end of this session on the Sweden Innovation Days on the Foresight event, Sitra meets Vinnova, or Vinnova meets Sitra, you could also say. But as Joachim said, we will also have an open call that will open on Monday. That is probably interesting to a lot of you listening in. You will find it on vinnova.se. Thanks again, Mikko, and to everyone who's been listening in. And we wish you a really great continue of your day. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye. Have a nice day.
Bye-bye.